Hey everybody, it's mid to late August. The forest is alive, the crickets are chirping, the swamp is loud, the fields are buzzing, and today we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite horror movies, and it's kind of contradictory to my first statement saying how I prefer redemption movies, which is true, redemption horror movies, that is true, but the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of my all-time favorite movies. It came out 11 years before I was born. I was born in 1985, and this came out in 1974. My mom always talked about when I was little how scared it made her, how weird it was, so I was always intrigued, and that fueled my love for cinema. And then one day it came, I think it was maybe at some point in the early 90s or late 90s, I decided to watch the movie. And it was a trip. And since then, I watch that movie every year around August, early September.
For them, an idyllic summer afternoon drive became a nightmare.
It fits that time period perfect. It's still summer. It's hot. It feels very seasonal for me. I said in my previous statement that I like watching movies in a seasonal aspect, at least some movies, and this is one of them. This is Tobe Hooper's best film, in my opinion. He's a really good director, highly underrated. Poltergeist was his, but Spielberg kind of ran the show, and there's a whole backstory behind that. But he really kills it with the directing here. So let's summarize this movie real quick. In the beginning, we hear these weird sounds. We get a nice little shots of fingernails and boots and rotting corpses, and then there's this big display of like a macabre piece of art on a monument, and you zoom out from it. It's a beautiful shot. And over this you hear a voiceover. It's actually John Larroquette, funny enough. But you hear this voiceover, and it's describing these grave robbings that happened and the bodies that they found. So Sally Hardesty, our main character, and her brother Franklin are taking a road trip with their friends Jerry, Kirk, and Pam across Texas on their way to her family's abandoned farmhouse that she used to go to when she was little. And along the way they stop at this graveyard, and she just wants to check to see if any of her family members' graves were disturbed. And you get a weird shot of this guy with his head backwards talking about things he's seen. A couple cool characters. It's very realistic, especially the way it's shot. They come across a hitchhiker. In the 70s, I think it was pretty common to pick up hitchhikers, so they pick this weird guy up. He's got like a birthmark or a scar. He's acting funny. He looks like real backwoods-ish. Great job by the actor, and the character is pretty well written. In this sequence, he talks about how his family used to work at the meat house, how they like the old-fashioned way of killing the cattle rather than the new one that Franklin was discussing. And he actually, earlier in the film, Franklin talks about the air gun, and he does this weird thing. It's just, I don't know, it's just part of the movie that sticks out to you. It's just boom, goes boom, and it's boom. He says he wants to take a picture of everybody, so he takes a picture, and then he does this weird thing where he asks for money, and they're like, no, dude, we don't want to give you money, and he gets kind of like offended, so he grabs these things out of his bag, and these weird things, and he puts them on a fire, and he burns their picture, and they're all like, what's going on? And he grabs Franklin, and he cuts his forearm, like right here, and it's kind of this weird 70s close-up with like prosthetics. So they kick him out, and he's spitting at the van, and he rubs his blood over it, and they run off and deal with that, I guess, instant trauma. So eventually they stop at a gas station. This is where we meet Drayton Sawyer, but at the time we don't know it's Drayton Sawyer. We just get, weird vibes, weird ambiance, meats. You just feel the summer. You feel the creepy backcountry aura that this is being set up for us. After they leave the gas station, which actually didn't have gas, which is, I guess, part of the plot, setting up their, where they are and more tension. So they finally get to the farmhouse. They get out of the car. Franklin's talking about the symbol he sees that the guy put with his blood. Does it mean anything? Kirk just laughs it off, and they just all go on and go into the house. And at one point, Kirk's in the house, and he goes into this room, and you hear this weird sound, and there's this like nest of thousands of daddy long legs, and you get this weird close-up against it. Again, building the tension, building the ambiance through old school filmmaking techniques and editing. Well, I guess that would be part of filmmaking techniques. At this point, Franklin's a little bit resentful because he is in the wheelchair, he can't enjoy himself, this whole thing that just happened. His sister's upstairs frolicking with her boyfriend.
Find have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it.
Kirk and Pam run up to him and ask him where the swimming hole is he used to talk about. And he kind of just, it's down there, you know, blah, blah, blah. We follow them for a little bit, and they come across this dried up creek bed, which obviously is the one Franklin was talking about, so that kind of sucks. And then they see this house in the distance. And Kirk gets the bright idea, like, hey, maybe they have gas. There's a weird generator that's going on. There's a bunch of cars packed behind a strange fence. The set design's really realistic, and it's just an imposing place that I would not go further into. And the house is really creepy from the outside. It's just this innocuous, slightly just dreadful white American house from that time period, a farmhouse with a, you know, a porch and a swing, and you know, the swing with the big shot that comes up. So they go onto the porch. Kirk finds some teeth. He scares Pam. She goes and sits on this swing. And you know what happens. Kirk walks in. He chases the squealing sound. He trips over a wire. And there is Leatherface, Big Bubba, with a big mallet standing in the doorway. And he just cracks Kirk over the head. He convulses, cracks him again, drags him in with his super strength, and slams that metal door shut. That sound that just hits, and it's creepy. And it sets a dreadful tone now, boy. Pam eventually wants to know what's going on. She goes up. She goes in. She's in that room full of skeletons, that creepy set design. Eventually Leatherface finds her, comes out of the metal door, chases her, brings her back, puts her on the hook, another iconic sequence. And she proceeds to watch Leatherface cut up her boyfriend in front of her with a chainsaw. And from this point out, the movie just descends into madness. We're left with Jerry, Sally, and Franklin back at the house waiting for Kirk and Pam, now that it's getting a little later in the afternoon. And you can really sense it with the light and the way that they set this up. So Jerry says, I'm going to go find her, whatever. So he goes off. We follow Jerry. We get some really beautiful shots of the sun as he's walking through, like really nice tracking shots. Everybody knows the Pam shot from earlier where she gets up from the swing. But this one also sticks out to me because it's later in the afternoon. It's kind of like a deeper orange of the sun, and it just works. So eventually Jerry gets to the house. He goes in. He encounters Leatherface. He gets killed. And now Leatherface is like freaking out. He's wondering what's going on, and he just sits there and he's looking out the window. The setting sun's kind of on his face, and you can see he decides something. So now it's nighttime. We cut back to the house. Sally and Franklin, they're fighting. They decide to go off into the woods. Eventually Leatherface pops out. He kills Franklin right in front of Sally. So now we're in the big chase scene from Sally. She goes all the way through the brush. She gets close. Leatherface, he gets close to her. They're stuck. He's using his chainsaw. He doesn't stop. She sees a house in the distance. She goes to the house. She doesn't know it's Leatherface's home. She runs inside as he gets up to her. Eventually goes into the house, sees the rotting grandparents, the half-dead grandpa. She decides to run down. Leatherface comes in. She jumps out the window. And again, there they go, chasing through the woods. So this goes on for a while. And it's an awesome sequence. It's super old school. It works. And actually, if you watch the behind the scenes, they really just filmed this in a like really small location, just with different shots to give the effect that they've been traveling a long time. So Sally comes across to this gas station again. She runs inside. Leatherface just disappears as she comes into the room. And there's Drayton Sawyer. Oh, what's going on? Are you all right? Are you okay? So she thinks she has safety. He winds up revealing himself as part of them, knocks her over the head in a potato sack, takes her in a truck, rolls up to the house. We see the hitchhiker. We see this whole family coming together. And there's Leatherface in the kitchen, now wearing a different outfit. He's got like a grandmother trans outfit going on, right? So it's just chaos. Sally's alone. All her friends are dead. She's just caught in this grinder of a nightmare. It goes on for a while. Eventually they feed her friends. She wakes up. You got these shots of the eyes. It's just an absolute nightmare. They even bring Grandpa down to try to kill her. He's got his sledgehammer. They're lifting his hand for him. He's hitting her head, nicking it. And it's really weird. But it's just really realistic, which makes the Texas Chainsaw Massacre work. So now it's almost dawn. Sally's just losing her mind, and she just gets an opportunity, blasts through the window. and just makes her way down the driveway in a beaten up, bloody state to the road in just any hope of getting away. Eventually, Leatherface and the hitchhiker get out of the house. They're chasing her down. The hitchhiker's slicing and dicing her. Leatherface is gaining ground, and he's also in a whole nother outfit now. This classic suit with the tie and the long curly hair. It's really bizarre. And she gets to the highway, and this freaking Mack 18-wheeler truck comes through. She freaks out. The hitchhiker gets completely run over, and we just have the iconic ending of the truck driver and then the pickup truck that gets Sally, Leatherface cutting his own leg. And then, of course, the dance, the sunrise chainsaw dance. You know, the girl gets away, but I'm sure she's traumatized for life. And they address it in this on the horizon. There he is, dancing and swinging his chainsaw as the sun is rising. It's a work of art. It's macabre, it's horrific, but I appreciate the filmmaking, especially compared to what we get today, especially what we get with the sequels and the remakes and the this and the that. The movie stands alone. It will never be topped. It changed the course of horror movies, I think, in my opinion. And it's just up there in the pantheon. And there's just cool things in this movie. I mean, you have the set design of the house, the red wall with the skulls of the animals, and the metal door that's just so creepy and weird. The house itself on the outside, like I said earlier, the white, the Americana, the less taken care of lawn, the generator running, the cars, which you can presume are other victims that they kept. The connection to Sally's grandfather's house, how it's a neighbor, but in Texas, neighbors are, hundreds of acres away. But the innocence of the kids just stumbling across this, just looking for help, it's weird. The fact that it takes place in the daytime is incredible. The shots are really thought out. The cinematography from Daniel Pearl is incredible. The use of natural light, the summer that it captures, the heat, nature. Even that shot of the armadillo in the beginning, which was apparently going to be a dog, but they decided to use an armadillo because it wasn't as disturbing. The close-ups of the solar flare in the opening credits, just everything worked. The sound design is very creepy, a lot of crinks and clanks and odd sound effects. It's really just an ambiance to the film. It comes and goes, it's slow, it's dreadful, a lot of strange, weird symbols and that the iconic photography sound, the click and the clack, metal sounds, and just the forest sounds, the generator. It really uses the environment, the scene. It uses the elements in the scene to produce the score for the movie, and it really works incredibly. And it's not just some generic score that comes out at jump scares and some studio hired somebody to fill in the gaps. This was well thought out, and it worked. This is a film. This is a work of art. The characters themselves are actually really well done and really well written for the short time that they are with us. It feels very real. Sally and her brother's relationship is extremely authentic. Their friends, the way they banter. Franklin's obvious insecurities and resentment for his injury comes across really well. The boyfriend and girlfriend, the young aspects, the fear that they project when they meet the hitchhiker. The out of the element aspect that they project when they are in the gas station, when they're at the graveyard, when they're actually lost. There's just a feeling that this film invokes, which is dread, heat, grit. It's got that great 70s style film look to it. When you think about horror icons, you think about Jason Voorhees, you think about Freddy Krueger, of course Michael Myers, Pinhead, which is somewhat of a lower tier. And Leatherface is definitely up there. I think up there with the top tier, maybe a little bit below, but the movie itself is up there in the top tier. But it does stand apart from those really famous slashers that we know, even though it is famous, because it just feels a little bit realer than all of them. It has this tainted Americana feel to it, the loss of innocence, and the movie itself is just really original. And so many films have tried to copy it since, and they just haven't come close. I mean, it is the backwoods, cannibal horror movie, the king of them. And for me personally, really up there with one of the kings of horror movies themselves. So if you haven't seen it, definitely go check the Chainsaw Massacre out. It's a phenomenal movie. It moves fast, it's scary, and like I said, for me personally, I watch it every August and September, and that once or twice a year viewing does prolong the enjoyment of it. And I'm gonna go now and get ready for bed, and I'm gonna put a movie on for sleep, and I'm thinking tonight, maybe Clash of the Titans.